Um, Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. And thank you for those who organized. I appreciate it. Queen's University is very happy to present Notes, Cigarettes, and a Ring, a conversation between Anna Shternshis, Vassili Schedrin, and Diego Rotman about Dr. Rotman's new book. I'm going to say basically nothing because we don't have a lot of time, but we're going to begin first with a little comment by Dr. Shternshis, who's the Alan Malka Green Professor of Yiddish Studies and the Director of the Anne Tenenbaum Center for Jewish Studies at the University of Toronto, the author of books, many articles, and co-founder of Yiddish Glory. And I think she will begin our conversation today. And after that, we'll move on to Dr. Schedrin, and then finally Dr. Rotman, one after another. All right, and then they will talk amongst themselves for a few moments. And then when that's done, we're going to open it up for a general conversation.
Thanks, Dustin, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Good to see you from everywhere where you are. It's very exciting. It's an honor and a privilege to be commenting on Diego Rotman's new book on Dzigan and Schumacher. And as I was reading this book, I was thinking, it's interesting how this book is about two figures that I guess everyone in the Yiddish world has heard something of. And yet, and so there is this kind of understanding that we know who these people are, who these actors are. And yet it is, as Diego says, the first book-length study of these actors. So, in some ways it's, I think a little like 20, maybe 30 years overdue, this study, because of the significance of Dzigan and Schumacher for Yiddish culture, for Polish culture, and for Jewish history of Jewish theater. And I'm definitely excited that it is here, that it's on my desk. I wish I had the technological knowledge of making it that's, covers my background screen on Zoom, but sorry, I couldn't do that. But, consider that like endorsement and advertisement for this book. And, just when we get beyond thinking about, oh, it's exciting and amazing that there's a book about Dzigan and Schumacher finally in print in English, I was thinking of themes that come across in the book that are relevant and crucial and central to issues that we are interested today in the field of Yiddish studies, cultural studies, diaspora studies, and history of theater. So, for example, it occurred to me as I was reading the study is that Dzigan and Schumacher are the examples of true, authentic, transnational artists. They started their career in Poland, then they ended up in the Soviet Union. They go back to Poland, which is of course very different Poland, which they left, and then end up in Israel. And although this trajectory is not unusual for, I don't know, Jews of the European Polish Jews of the mid-20th century, what is unusual about it is that in all these places, the duo manages to find audience, entertain that audience, and all the time in the language of the minority. So as all historians of humor and scholars of humor talk about often is that how humor is very local, very acute, and very to the moment. So for a comedian to move to another country often means the end of their career. It's very hard to perform for an audience where you don't know nuances of what's going on. And Dzigan and Schumacher defied those odds in so many ways, partially because the audience moved with them, but partially, I think, because of their talent and ability to see things that made the audience tick in Poland in the 1930s, in the Soviet Union, in the 1940s, and of course, later in Israel. I would also say that, and I will talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but I also would say that another important contribution that this book makes is generally to the history of Yiddish theater. I think it's the first study that firmly kind of puts Dzigan and Schumacher in discussion with the history of Yiddish theater, and it goes beyond just, thinking about what was staged and why in Yiddish theaters around the world, but actually thinking about in what way did Dzigan and Schumacher fit in the Yiddish theatrical tradition, in which one they didn't. Where did they see themselves when it came to development of Yiddish theater in Poland and then later in Israel? It was fascinating to me to see how Diego analyzes how some of the same skits that Dzigan and Schumacher did in Poland worked later in the Soviet Union and later in Israel in a completely different context. Einstein Weinstein and the skit Abi Mezetzich, as long as we see each other. So it's interesting how the words changed insignificantly as far as I understood, but the meaning and the audience reception was relevant in all the countries where they performed, but for different reasons. Again, it's historians and literary scholars to some extent often feel like it's easier to explain things with historical circumstances, but I think something has to be said, and I don't know what you think about this, about the unique talents of the duo. I mean, something has to be said about that, yes, they lived through all the things they lived through, but there was something about their incredible ability, a dynamic working together, and also individual ability to feel their audience, to go with their audience, and entertain their audience in the way that this audience needed. So and I think this study really kind of gives voice to both Dzigan and Schumacher in that way, without diminishing them to just a phenomena that reflects the experience of Polish Jews as they lived through World War II and then immigrated to Israel. Another kind of example of this incredible talent and popularity of Dzigan and Schumacher, Diego shows that many of their jokes became folklore, and people even forget that this stuff comes from Dzigan and Schumacher, again, true testament to their success. I would also say that the book makes a serious contribution to the study of Yiddish cinema. Again, popular genre, and again, under-researched, but there are a lot of discussion, in detailed discussion, about 3 Yiddish films made with Dzigan and Schumacher participation before the war: Al Hate, Freiliche Kapzonim, and Ona Heim, and especially the film Our Children, Unsere Kinder, which was made in Poland in 1949. I don't know, Diego, what you think about this, but I think in so many ways, Dzigan and Schumacher were really ahead of their times in how they approached things that until now we grasp with. And as I was reading your analysis of the film Our Children, I don't know if everyone in the audience has seen that film, and if you haven't, strongly recommend it. Every time I watch this film, I think about, my goodness, like this question: can Holocaust be portrayed artistically on stage? Can children talk about, are we allowed to, I don't know, make Holocaust entertainment? Where's humor in the Holocaust? All these things that seem like such a cutting edge scholarship today. Well, wait a second, here's the film, Unsere Kinder. And in 1949, they're dealing with all this. They're asking and answering these questions on screen in a way that we are calling today innovative way to study history and put memory on stage and stuff like this. So, and you write about this, how they blend documentary sources with artistic performances. I didn't know, it was a revelation to me that Schumacher's daughter was in the film, Lydia. I mean, come on, this is very interesting and exciting. And this whole idea of these children in the film telling story of how children survived the Holocaust, but not their own story, is very important and interesting. And I think that there are issues in the film of which you also write in the book, that I was wondering if you can talk to us about, in the line of thinking that how children talk about what happened to them during World War II in Poland or wherever they were. It's interesting how they provide a lot of details in the film of what actually happened to them. And these details, of course, were mostly collected by Rochel Overbach, in her study of survivors of Warsaw Ghetto. And it's interesting to me, where do you think this idea that survivors did not talk about Holocaust or were discouraged from talking about Holocaust right after the war comes from? Like, even in your book, it says, well, survivors were discouraged from talking about Holocaust right after the war. And yet the film itself talks about Holocaust every minute with the voices of actors who portray survivors. So where's that discrepancy come from? Why do we want to repeat this? And yet we see with our own eyes and hear with our own ears that they're actually talking about all that on screen in 1949. I was wondering also what you think, I don't know if you've seen the new book by Rebecca Clifford on, children Holocaust survivors, and, how she discusses, why this discrepancy exists. But, we can talk more about this if this is something that you're interested in. So another thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit more is the nature of the humor. I kept thinking about how, what it's like for Dzigan and Schumacher to live through, 1930s Poland, think about, entertaining the Jewish audiences who have just heard about Nuremberg laws, but don't take them seriously. Fascinating observation I find in your book, who discuss issues of immigration when no one's really talking about today, about, this discussion of immigration of Poland 1930s. And then entertaining Russian soldiers in the Soviet Union. And I think that contribution of your book, we already talked about this earlier, is unparalleled. Like, nobody has written about them being in Aktubinsk and being in Gulag, and then, in Ashgabat, right at the beginning, I think, and then in Tashkent. I mean, that stuff is really interesting. And what one of those big dramatic moments in your book is when you describe how Dzigan and Schumacher entertain Russian soldiers in the Soviet Union. Those soldiers are super receptive to that humor and to their performance without understanding a single word that they're saying. And then that's just proposed when they are performing for Israeli soldiers later, already after immigrating to Israel, I think in the 60s. And the soldiers, those Israeli soldiers, are laughing at the wrong spots of their performance. And Dzigan understands that they're laughing because they want them off stage. So it's, for Dzigan, this is like the traumatic moment of when they, as a comedy duo, him and Schumacher, become less relevant to their audience. And, authors and writers often talk about what it's like to immigrate and what it's like to live in this situation when you lose your language and you are silenced not by censorship, which is interestingly they experience a lot more in Israel than anywhere else where they lived, but the inability to speak to your audience. Edward Said called it death without the mercy of death, talking about the exile and the inability to speak to your audience. So I was wondering what the impression I got from your book is that this death by silence was a much bigger trauma for them than, I don't know, an ability to make jokes and bring humor and the Holocaust together in the same sentence. And it's also interesting to me, I don't know what you think about this. Why did it take so long for them to bring their Gulag experience on stage? And you're right about this. And you say that they did talk about Gulag in Israel in their comedy skits, but it took forever until like the first discussion of that was in the 60s, I think, from what I understand that your book. So in 1949, they're talking about Holocaust, which is seen as a major trauma and a transforming point for Polish Jewish community. 20 years it takes until they actually talk about what happened to them Gulag and make it into comedy. So it's interesting to me why, you know, what's happening there and why you think what role this played in all this. And I guess I will finish my remarks just with another just question out of curiosity. You know, I don't know, maybe it's a little naively, I wanted to learn more, a little bit about their families. I don't know, wives, kids. You know, Lydia Schumacher is mentioned a lot in the film, and I'm, you know, grateful to her for giving you the archive of her dad, because, you know, these fascinating pictures. But, you know, what's Dzigan's personal life? Who's Schumacher's wife? You know, like, I'm curious, you know, where's their personal story in the book? Why is it not there? So there must be something in that silence that, you know, tells the story louder than words. But, you know, I do want to say, Diego, congratulations on this book. It's a page turner, and it gives a sense of, you know, of Dzigan and Schumacher's creativity, their contribution to Jewish culture in Poland and in Israel, and it really makes one want to rewatch those blurry YouTube clips with his skits, you know, available to us. And I hope that this is not the last study of the duo, but you know, it will lead to more scholarship on that. And thank you for writing this book, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about this.
All right, thank you very much for those. Quite a lot to process, I'm sure. So Diego will have a few minutes to sort of scamper up an answer. In the meantime, we're going to hear from Queens's very own Vassili Schedrin, who works in the history department and is currently working on two very exciting books, which I can't talk about right now because it would use up the rest of the time. But Diego, take it. Oh, or sorry, Vassili.
Hi, I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I don't sleep anymore. Vassili first. My apologies. All right.
This is what I thought. Vassili first, or I'm reacting to.
Yeah, let's go Vassili first, and you can that way you can sort of pick and pull and sort of answered everything all at once. I think makes the most sense.
Oh, thank you very much, Anna. I will continue later. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you, Dustin, and thank you everyone, especially Diego, along with congratulations with his new book, and not new, the translation, which would reach wider audiences. The fact I like a lot, and I want to thank Diego, I want to thank Dustin for organizing this. To me, Diego's was a wonderful and thought-provoking book that made important, as my teachers used to say, factual as well as conceptual contribution to study of modern Jewish history and Yiddish theater in particular. And unlike Anna, I will concentrate on serious aspects of it, not on humor. It would be very personal for me also, because I work on biography on Solomon Michoels, the major star of Soviet Yiddish theater, the contemporary of Dzigan and Schumacher. So I was reading Diego's book through a lens of Michoels' life, seeking artistic parallels, shared life experiences, and politics especially. And from this perspective, I'd like to talk a little bit what I found and what I missed in Diego's book. And let me start with what I found. First of all, it's the very well done documented discussion of theater as power, political power, and social power, and of Yiddish actor as a political leader. So that was central for Michoels, who wrote in the 30s, when actor engages and controls the audience, then he feels that he is a leader. And what does it mean to be a leader? It means to be in charge, to lead. And it's precisely this that actor seeks to accomplish. So I would say that's very relevant for the duo, for Dzigan and Schumacher as well. And but they considered and framed their work by theater. However, for Michoels, so for them, theater was really not only the stage, but a home. And that made the theater a home for the audiences. However, for Michoels, it was the instrument, which is interesting difference. So like in the 40s, Michoels reflected about his formative years when his dream was to become a lawyer, not an actor. He said that in my dreams, I didn't think about actor's job in the strict sense, but simply dreamed about an exciting opportunity of engaging live audience. At some point, it seemed to me that I should become a lawyer come tribune who moves people with the sheer power of his words. It seemed to me that confronting the audience means leading it, it means revealing to the audience something truly important. And so he claimed that before the Soviet state created Yiddish theater, he had no opportunity to go to the people and to address the people. It's theater that gave him this opportunity. He gives very interesting own illustration of this connection between actor and the audience. To me, it's essentially very Soviet, because it's, in a way, it's muted, it's indirect, it's censored, but it's very revealing. So Michoels remembered how during the performance of one of his theater, the Gazette Moscow State Yiddish Theater shows, based on Mendel and Moher's forums, travels of Benjamin III, there was a power outage in the theater. So there is no light on stage, there is no light in the theater halls. So public got confused, and especially after 5 minutes, people started to become anxious, and some, Michoel sensed, started to leave. So he decided to continue, and his way to continue is that he started to sing the, of all things, the Red Army's Civil War time song, which in just less than a minute moved the audience. So people started to sing along, and they enthusiastically sang along until the end of the power outage, and then show resumed. It's a very interesting example, while many examples from Diego's book are very, unlike Michoels's, direct and vivid. So like audiences, laughter, immediate reactions, critical responses from the press, and even from the very Israeli politicians, which Duo mocked. And again, back to the leader, actor as a leader and leadership, it's interesting that it was Michoels, not his contemporary Soviet Yiddish writers, poets, artists, nor Jewish communists and activists in the Soviet Union, who represented new Jewish life under the communism to ordinary Soviet Jews, who considered Michoels informal leader and still consider. So today, many define themselves through Michoels. So it leads me to the question which Diego might want to tackle. What are Dzigan and Schumacher's place as leaders in today's Jewish memory, in today's Jewish maybe public discourse? You give the example of the court ruling that mentioned them, giving their humoristic definition of Israeli democracy. But I mean, at large, you might have something to say about it. It will be very interesting to me. Linked to this leadership issue is Diego's concept of stage as home for actors and theater as home for their audiences. That is, in larger terms, is a collective Jewish identity in modern age. Often defined as essentially secular identity, the modern Jewish sense of collective, as Diego's, I would say, brilliant analysis of Dzigan and Schumacher's art, especially their skit of 1958, Der Neuer Diebeck, that art was permitted with traditional and religious symbols, and also the symbols from the history of Yiddish theater or Jewish theater at large, like Hebrew performances of the Dibok. And I was always also like Diego's discussion of their art and the signifiers of Jewish collective sense on stage that provide the sense of homeland, home, territory, which is very important in Judaism. So, for instance, when I am explaining to students the philosophy of the exile, the mode of existence of the Jews for many ages, I explained the shift from space to time, from the temple and temple service to book, to Torah, and to reading, studying, and so on. And so the new leadership roles that teachers, that is rabbis, acquired with this shift, and how it helped to have the homeland wherever they live in the exile. And to me, that was revealing the quote from one of Dzigan's skits about the red kerchief, the part of the ultra-Orthodox Hasidic costume that became a metonymy for this home, for this land, and experience that Jews have in the exile. Using religious symbolism and traditional references is also true for Michoel, so who believed that Russian Revolution was a kind of redemption for the Jews and the end of Jewish history, USSR as a promised land. But like with the leadership, with the issue of leadership, and my question about leadership, I have a question about this theater as home concept, the disappearance of Yiddish theater together with its audiences. So as Anna mentioned, that even when they ended up in Israel, they still had these Yiddish audiences, the immigrant audiences from Eastern Europe who attended their shows and felt at home there. So with the disappearance of Yiddish theater together with its audience as a mass culture phenomenon, if the Yiddish theater as home is history, or what its place on today's like memory culture. And my final thing is what I missed. And it's the individual personal dimension of theatrical lives. Like in the case of Michoel's, analysis of his personal and family life shows direct impact upon his art and life-changing decisions. There is one archival illustration. There is a script he used in 1933 when directing the show in Moscow of Dovid Bergelson's Midas Adin. And there are two dramas. One drama was on the front of the script with his notes for the actors and for him as a director. On the reverse side of the script, there was his personal drama unfolding when he recorded his feelings after two losses of his first wife and then second wife, which is very interesting. And then that experience led him to Lear of all the choices in Yiddish theater. And that personal dimension of theatrical lives to me includes such aspects as duality, which is especially relevant to duo, to Dzigan and Schumacher. Dzigan dash Schumacher. So like who were Shimon Dzigan and Israel Schumacher personally, their families and so on. So in the history of Michoel's theater, we also have such duo, Michoel's and Benjamin Zuskin, the star who many argue is much greater than Michoels as an actor, and their dynamic within their duo was reflected the dynamic of theater's history. So that's my last question. How about personal lives, families, and especially the duality of Dzigan - Schumacher? That's all of my notes, cigarettes, and the ring. And again, thank you, Diego. That's a wonderful book. I really enjoy it.
Thank you, Vassili, for that. That was really wonderful. Next time we'll have notes, cigarettes, and rings we can pass out and into a live audience or something like that. And finally, the belle of the ball or star of the show, Dr. Diego Rotman.
So thank you very much, Vassili, Anna, for your generous reading of my book, for your time, and for being here. Thank you, Dustin, for organizing this event. It's great to be back in Kingston from here, so I'm really enjoying. I'm coming back from the future, according to the time zone, a couple of hours in the evening here already. So I will try to answer some of the questions, to react to the notes. And I hope that I will answer. I wrote many things, and from where to start? I think I will start from this idea of stage as home, and for this idea of transnational aspect of Dzigan and Schumacher life. I think that especially after the Holocaust, it's not the theater itself, it's not the stage, but the performance itself, the performative time, is the moment and the place and the territory where this idea of temporal territoriality is being created. And I think, at least this is the way I see that. So through these temporal territories and temporary homeland that is being created through language and through performance and through the meeting and the co-presence with their public, they are reconstructing or this territory that is already that actually disappeared. So in a way, I think I'm writing in the book that the lodge that they are performing on stage is more real than the lodge where they are performing in post-war Poland. And I think they have the ability to create this territory and this Yiddish environment, this Yiddish they're able to bring it back on stage, but not bringing it back in a nostalgic way. They are performing it. It is living in those couple of hours that the performance is taking place. And this is the reason why they are performing in this, not Yiddish land, but maybe Lodge land, that it's happening everywhere in all of the different places where they are appearing. They, of course, they have an incredible ability to combine those territories and with the local culture. They were very fast in translating, in adapting, in absorbing the surround reality in order to make it and to bring the feeling that they are connected to those specific places. So there are a type of parallel layers that are happening in the in those places. Type of, in my eyes, is a type of hybrid territory. The Yiddish land with the country where they are performing. So this is one thing. I don't know if I'm answering. And I think that is also autonomous from the, especially in Israel, it is, there is something activist in there, maybe relating to what Vassili was saying. There is here a very political approach. It's not just that we are performing in Yiddish because it is our language. There is a strong meaning. There is a very conscious intention in creating this reality as a counter reality to the one that is actually hosting them. And I think one of what I like, it's a very nice, nice, I don't know if it's nice, but the fact that they are living in a hotel in Tel Aviv till 1958, it's talking a little bit about their concept, their way of being wandering, and the only stable place is the stage. And you know, I think I mentioned in the book that actually the irony is that the hotel where they are staying, the Bristol Hotel, is actually on Ben Yehuda Street. So this is like I don't know. It's like they thought about that. There is so many meaning in those small decisions. So this is one thing. Regarding that they are ahead of their time, yes, absolutely. I think there is no doubt about that. It is a little bit related to to the influence of Moshe Broderson, of course. I think one of the most brilliant decisions by Broderson is to call the theater Ararat, combining actually in one name also this idea of territory, this connection to Jewish tradition, and also Ararat as an acronym of Artistische Revolutionäre Theater. So it's everything together. It is here and it is there. We are in Ararat, but we are in London, in Poland, and we are in Europe and in Russia. So everything is condensed in this name, and I think that one of the most, I brought one picture because when I'm teaching the anthem of Ararat, I will share it with you. Just a second. If I should find, okay, here. Yeah, this is the Ararat poster. It's not important, but the anthem. It says like this. It's written by Broderson in Yiddish. Vergeht der Welt in schwarzen Schimmer, zum Mabel nimmt an Eck, es leiken klafter die junge Schwimmer und suchen wo Breg, der Cholel ist noch als verchmaret, es ist noch weit von Ruh und Teibe. Zu dem Berg Ararat wir schwimmen zu. In English, a world is passing in a black shimmer, the flood is coming to an end. Young swimmers swim from crawl and search for a shore, the skies are still clouded. It is yet far from calm, without an arc, and I think that's very, very nice. You know, they are swimming to Mount Ararat. We swim and we go on swimming. And when I'm teaching, I'm always looking for pictures about this situation. And this is the picture I found this week. And in a way, I think that this is extremely strong, and it succeeds to describe the feeling that Broderson is in a way trying to share with their actors. So we are seeing now Moroccan refugees swimming from Morocco to the coast of Spain, you know, arriving to a new, unexpected new world that is going to maybe change their life. They are not able to come back like the young swimmers, artists that are trying to leave the old Yiddish theater and to create a new and better world. And what I found in this picture is this family, white Spanish family, watching this performance of survival, of trying to have a hope and documenting it with a cell phone. So I was thinking also on that because of the reactions of the local lodge audience to the revolutionary language of Ararat at that time. And this tragic photo, I think, it's in a way giving one possible meaning to to Ararat idea, to the Ararat anthem. And I have a quote by Dzigan also, who wrote, I will read only in English, "With my young revolutionary belief, I was persuaded that the new Yiddish theater must begin anew from Genesis and rebuild everything afresh." So that's regarding Ararat and locality. But I wanted to talk about something else, about the talent. Absolutely, there is. It's hard to describe the talent they had. I think that the best place to find an objective approach to their acting style is in the Hebrew press by actually one of the hardest critics from Israeli theater, Chaim Gamso, who is writing so nicely about mostly Dzigan because he wrote in the later time, and he's putting him as a model for the Hebrew actors. So there is no doubt that they were also amazingly talent artist. Before I go to the Gulag and those questions and the questions regarding Unsere Kinder, that actually was one of the films that was screened in Kingston. I think maybe it was the city that the film was screened 3 or 4 times. I think perhaps it's the most Unsere Kinder city in the world. I'm sorry about that. So regarding that, they were ahead of their time. Also, we can see that with the Abim Zetzich, that I think that is in a way in parallel, and maybe some years before, the absurd theater of Beckett, and I wrote a little bit about that. This is so ahead of that type of theater. But one thing that I think that make them like absolutely ahead of their time, and it is actually a scene that is not happening on their theater, and it's the scene and the event that is happening actually when they were filming Al-Het. And when they were filming Al-Het, and I brought also a couple of pictures to share with you. Just a second. It was in 1936, and they were filming Al-Het, and there was it was published an article by Słonimski in a Polish paper, a very anti-Semitic article, and they were filming Al-Het very close to the IPS Cafe, Instytut Propagandy Sztuki in Warsaw. And I will read the what Dzigan is writing about that. Here. So he writes, during lunch break, we talk excitedly about Słonimski article. Moshe Broderson, the writer Naiman, the artist Yenkele Adler, Schumacher and I, both of us were made up for the movie Bird and School Cap, Kaftan in the best of Jewish tradition. Yenkele Adler, the painter, suddenly said, I will give you a bottle of champagne if you will go dressed like that with kaftan, bird and sidecars to Ips and order something. Everyone burst out laughing. Schumacher looked at me. We got up and we went out into the street. I went in first. I crossed the threshold. Around me, everyone fell silent. The Goyim, non-Jewish, looked at me with wonder, and the Jewish intellectual Jews who were sitting in the cafe bowed their heads in shame. Not intellectual, it's okay. One of the waiters approached me and said, this is no place for you. I turned the manager of the cafe. Sir, why is the waiter saying that this is no place for me? The manager was a sharp-witted non-Jew, and he replied, because here everything is non-kosher. No problem, I said. I'll just have tea. At that moment, Schumacher appeared at the door, an innocent look on his face and a skull cap on his head. Hoi, the waiter blurted. It's an invasion. It took the opportunity provided by the confusion to sit down at a table. With sure steps, Schumacher approached me, greeted me, and sat down. We began speaking loudly in Yiddish. All the while, talking with our hands. And this is Ypres Cafe. And I think that this image is probably the image when they enter with those clothes into the Ypres Cafe. And actually, it's, in my eyes, the first intervention or art or performance art being done in the history of Jewish theater. It's 1936, and they are like in the Woody Allen's film, the Purple Rose of Cairo. They're coming out from the cinema, they're coming out from the film, from the screen, going into the reality, going into converting this cafe into their stage, actually talking in Polish at the beginning, yes, of their scene, and in a way doing what Augusto Boal will develop 30 years later as the theater of the oppressed, and what is called the invisible theater, performing when people is not being aware that there is a performance taking place in that side. So in that sense, I think that they were absolutely ahead of their time. I really like this moment. And also it's related to this actor as leader that Vassili was. It's not only actors, it's also as citizens. They have a very strong political agency, not only on theater, also out of stage, also in the everyday life. We have 10 minutes more, so I will try to leave time for the audience to ask. Regarding Unsere Kinder, I will only say that okay, I will to Unsere Kinder. I think there is no doubt that the influence of Rochel Auerbach is related to the to bringing those stories into the script. They were not part of the Holocaust, and this is actually represented in the film. They are coming from the Soviet Union. They were not there, and again, like in Ararat, coming from out from the flu to the new life. I think that this is the message that the film is trying to bring, like coming from the darkness, from the nightmare to a new life, and the kids as it was in the discourse at that time as the symbols of the Jewish renewal of life in Poland. There are a lot of other notes that I wrote, but maybe Dustin is maybe. I should answer more, or maybe ask if there are other questions.
Let's ask if there's other questions, and then we can just put more in the pot. Are there other questions?
I have a question. First of all, thank you, Diego, for your wonderful book. I've been reading it. Is Al Chet available anywhere?
Okay, it is available. We can discuss it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And,
That's clear.
Yeah. And also, I really appreciate the insights, because from Dzigan's memoir, you get a very one-sided look. So your dimension and your contextualization is really excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for translating. And I think that what you are doing is a bit answering also what Vassili was asking, what is the place of Dzigan and Schumacher today? And there is a growing interest, I think, on their work. Not only CDs are being sold till today, also now Miriam is translating into English Dzigan's autobiography. It's being also translated in Hebrew these days. We are working with Leah also in a puppet theater with the Dzigan and Schumacher that is relating also to Dzigan and Schumacher's puppets. But that's another story.
I also think it has the makings of a one-man play. I'm talking to some theater people to see if we can get scripts, because that would bring in the Gulag part, because the Gulag part doesn't fit with the others so much. The book is like 3 separate things. And the Gulag part, I think, was probably the most painful. I mean, they were literally tortured. Yeah.
It is very interesting because it is actually the main place where he's talking about that time is in his biography that is in 1974. And about Israel, Anna, he's not speaking at all. He decided not to include that in the book. He died. He passed away in 98, so he didn't have the time to arrive to 2000 in order to be able to open the mouth, because actually the only reference that we have regarding his decision not to talk about Israel is from the book launch of the autobiography, where he's saying that if he should talk about Israel, he would be, he had to escape from Israel. That is so painful that he's not able to talk. So it takes time.
He did say in that introduction that it was only in 1974, after 24 years, that he felt at home in Israel. And that was because that gala, they did that big gala, which was the context, I think, for the book. So, yeah.
Yeah, but it was also the same time that he was very upset, and he was talking and in the press and saying that if he would be younger, he would convert into Christianity. So it is a very complex time, and the autobiography was not written only by him. So it was a little bit, it's representing a collective, and he of course loved Israel. Regarding the family life, I think that was another question that was. There is of course a lot of place to write, especially about Schumacher's wife. Because she was a very interesting person. She was a poet, she was a writer, she was an actress that didn't continue acting. She's actually Lydia's mother. And there is material that actually I found it only when I finished the book that was part of the archives that Lydia had. It's mostly, there is a lot of letters, mostly in Polish. So there is a huge work to be done about her. She was a very important figure. She also wrote a couple of pieces in Polish. And regarding Dzigan didn't have kids, only children, only his wife, Eva. That there is a story about her in Dzigan's book. There is not much more information about her. They don't have really family so it's hard to learn because they construct the Dzigan and Schumacher as a type of family, as a type of model. I think I'm talking in a book about this plan to build the two houses together and this secret place where they meet like a secret lovers, on the top of their houses in Tel Aviv. That actually never happened, but.
Wonderful. Does anyone else from the audience have any more questions? Rebecca, are you trying to talk?
Yeah, I'm trying to put my hand up and I'm just on mute. Thank you. This was wonderful to hear everybody's reflections on Diego's book, which I'm really looking forward to reading. I haven't gotten my hands on the English copy yet. I was fortunate enough to be at one of the Kingston screenings of Unsere Kinder, and I wondered, you came to it briefly, but Anna had asked you in the questions earlier, why the theme of the Gulag, they're so late to treat it. And I'm trying to remember the sort of treatment in Unsere Kinder, but I wondered if you could talk about sort of the articulation between the sort of memory of the Holocaust and memory of the Gulag, and if there's some kind of, as artists who do treat the Holocaust, in fact, surprisingly for somebody sort of on the outside early, but who had escaped that experience themselves, if that sort of factors into the way they reflect on their own wartime experiences.
What can I say? Actually, it's about another reason why they deal with the Holocaust at that time, and they Shaul Goskin, that was the producer of the film, he did another film, a short film, Mir Lebensgebliebene, that it's dealing and documenting Jewish life after the Holocaust. And actually, in a way, that was a type of continuation of that film. Regarding other artists, I don't know if there were other Jewish artists at that time in Poland dealing with that. No, I don't think that I can expand on that, Rebecca.
I guess I'm sort of more interested in how, what the space is to speak about that Gulag experience that clearly.
But in Poland or later? Are you mean?
Later, how they sort of reflect on it's an aspect of a wartime, and their Gulag experience is a wartime experience, and how they address that, and how they bring that into a narrative that by the 60s is clearly the central experience is one of either, is survival or some, yeah.
I will answer that question. Before I want to answer Anna's reference to the positive image of the Russian soldiers, because actually they have two contradictory statements on that. In the book, he's saying that actually when they are going to perform in front of the Russian soldiers, they are those who are who are telling them, go away from here and go and fight. But when he has to make a critique to the Israeli soldiers, he remembers the Russian soldiers in a good way. So they are an example of how the soldiers should be. So that's a very interesting point. And mostly they're referring in different skits about the, now it's in Hebrew, about the Leningrad Mishpat, how do you say the
Leningrad Affair?
Yeah, Leningrad Affair and all the about all the persecution against Jews in Poland. There is also another skit that is about. Well, I have a blackout now. Someone who is coming. He's talking also. He has a couple of skits talking with by phone with Kosygin. There is another skit where there is an someone from Soviet. I don't remember the name. Is someone an historical name who is coming to Israel, and he's well received from the Soviet Union, and someone who is actually coming, but I don't remember the name. And when they discover that actually he's a Zionist, all the people leave him alone, and they don't want to talk with him anymore. So they are most of the skits are critical to Soviet Union. They are not skits written by them. They are from different authors. That's important. They are not the authors of those texts. And there are some. I have some like 5 or 10 texts related to that period.
Okay, I think we have time we don't really, but we have one. We'll pretend we have time for one more quick question. Anna, would you like to? Anna Gunter, do you want to take that question?
Hi, Diego and Vassili and Anna. Thank you so much for this wonderful program. I feel I need to respond somewhat to Anna, your question about why the Gulag is not featured and in the story of coming back. And I think that it has to do with several things. I think that at the end of the war, those who survived in the Gulag and came back, and my parents were among them, and trust me, we have some horror stories. encountering the reality of what happened to Polish Jewry kept them silent about their own experiences in that context. And then what happened, unfortunately, we got into this, what I call the Holocaust Olympics. And that is, you know, oh, your experience, you know, your experience was a Sunday picnic, you know, you didn't really suffer, you didn't. So it took time. And even, you know, the claims conference and the official Jewish community understanding that people who experienced the war in the Soviet Union, let alone in the Gulag, deserve to be considered survivors, you know, quote unquote survivors. And so I think that history, that political and emotional dealing with each of their own realities needed to take a certain amount of time. And certainly in the film Unsere Kinder, when they are put in their place by the children who experienced what they did, I think is very telling of what was going on at the end of the war with the meeting of survivors from the Soviet Union and survivors from Poland. And so I think not performing their story initially kind of makes sense and fits into that whole psychodrama.
Diego, any final words?
Yeah, I want to finalize actually with a video fragment to share with you related to this topic, and I think that can be a nice ending. Just a second.
Shalom. Boker tov, tavarishi. Slicha, lo tavarishi, chaverim. Kol Yisrael chaverim. Be'azir der kennt mich nicht. Adrabe, wer bin Kaganovich. Точно. Lazar Moisevich Kaganovich, Ole Chadash.
Okay, that's it. This is Kaganovich, one of the fragment that I couldn't remember the name.
Is tief tire and dreert.
Okay, well, on that note, I would like to thank Diego, Vassili, and Anna for this wonderful conversation. I'd like to thank everyone who helped organize it, including Alison Golenlock, who's in the background holding all the levers to the computer programs. And again, thank you everyone for coming, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Anna, Vassili, and Dustin. Thanks a lot, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Hi, Maury.
All right.